Welcome to Westeros.org's bonus materials for our review and recap of episode 6, The Climb. This week, Elio will be providing some background material that's relevant for the episode, and I'll be handling the highs and the lows.
So, background was a little difficult to come up with for this episode. First, apologies if I cough or sneeze or whatever during this. I fell ill during the time of working on our stuff for the episode, and I'm still a little under the weather. So, apologies. Let's talk about a bit of a sore point of us, and it's because, like, within the episode itself, they contradict themselves, and it's, like, really annoying. Tywin Lannister says, I'm going to name Loras a Kingsguard. I will write up an order that he's going to join the Kingsguard. And she said, oh, what, you'll have a man defending him, who's been forced to do it, and I want one who will be true to his vows. And basically the idea is that Sir Loras is honorable, and if he has to join the Kingsguard, of course he'll say the vows and mean it, or whatever. But in this very episode, we have Edmure complaining about the whole marriage situation, and he says, no man can compel another to wed. Now, that's actually saying a much broader, it's a very narrow thing that he says, but it actually has a much broader application. What it actually means is the holy vows, you cannot be made to swear holy vows. Like, what is the worth of vows that are forced on you? There's a point in the books as well. Jaime Lannister thinks to himself later, after the idea that, at sword point he was made to swear that he would see Sansa returned and so on. He'd wonder what the High Septon would say about, a vow compelled at sword point. If it's not freely given, it's not really a vow that the gods are going to put any stock in, right? So how in the world does it work that a Kingsguard knight is forced to join the Kingsguard? It doesn't make any sense. And I'm thinking about it, and from every single example I can think of a knight in the Kingsguard, past or present, including knights that no one else knows about because we know about them from the world of Ice and Fire, each and every one wanted to be in the Kingsguard. None of them was ordered to join against their will. What's the point, right? So in the setting, holy vows cannot be compelled. Technically. Obviously, as we see at the Tyrion-Sansa situation, families have a great deal of leverage over their members. And Tywin can exert enormous pressure on Tyrion. And Sansa has absolutely nothing she can really do to stop them from making her do this. And the fact is that once you're married, and it's consummated and so on, well then, what can you do? You can't just run away and say this isn't a real marriage. If you've got kids or whatever, if you're a woman alone in the world with no family left to you, or the family are traitors and can no longer help you, your lot is pretty bad. And doubtless there are many young men and women in Westeros who have been made to marry people they did not wish to marry. But it's a pragmatic decision. Like, well, what's the point of struggling? I'll have to marry eventually. But this particular thing, especially when they hinge a major political threat into it, it's not smart and doesn't really make any sense whatsoever. If you want to say in the show canon, yes, of course you can name somebody to Kingsguard against their will. I mean, what are you gonna do? It's just, but it seems so silly. I think they could have done it another way. And stay true to the setting where there are certain concepts of how things are done, and the idea of a unwilling Kingsguard. Jaime Lannister wanted to join the Kingsguard. When he joined, his sister arranged it. They did it to be together. Almost immediately he regretted it. This is absolutely true. But the moment that he said those vows, he actually absolutely meant them. So it's not really the same thing. I'm really baffled, and it feels, as you'll see when Linda discusses it, it felt like something that by fiat they decided, like, we have to resolve this change, and so we'll come up with this thing that doesn't hold water. So it goes. So that is the vows in the Seven Kingdoms. In short, a vow doesn't count if it's forced.
So, for the highs and the lows, well, we weren't too fond of this episode, that has to be said. It looked really nice. Director Alex Sakharov did a fabulous job, got some beautiful lighting in there, some lovely scenes. So that's a big plus. You know, it's always nice with some eye candy, basically. But and there were some scenes that we did like. We thought that the Sam and Gilly scene, that was a nice, well-acted scene. The climb itself is, you know, spectacular. It's made more dramatic than it actually is in the books, but yeah, it worked well. It was quite nice, but it does lead into some little discussion here about John and Ygritte. We'll start with that for the lows. We really didn't like how they turned this whole John Ygritte thing into an us versus them from her angle, how she decides that, oh, I know that you're not really with the wildlings, and, well, you know, the Watch doesn't care about you, the wildlings don't care about me, so we'll just look out for each other. It's a bit of a cliche. And then we get a really big cliche when they finally reach the top of the wall, and this Hollywood-esque shot of them kissing on top of the wall. It's all very pretty, but Jesus, what a cliche. I mean, in the books, Ygritte gets up there and she's crying, not necessarily because she's afraid, although she just said the wall was trying to throw her off several times. She's upset about the fact that they never found the horn of Joramun, and so they won't be able to take down this monstrous wall that is out to kill them. And it's not really something that she's been longing for, standing on top of the wall, that's for sure. And unfortunately, the cliches and the problems don't end with that, and I had to have a little cheat note for this one, actually, so let's see what we've got next. Well, we've got the Brotherhood without banner turned into religious zealots who will sell out Gendry just because Melisandre comes calling. Never mind that Thoros has been resurrecting Beric and seems to have, you know, a hotline to the Lord of Light himself. As soon as Melisandre comes and says, I need this boy for King Stannis because he's the rightful king and the chosen and la-di-da. Why doesn't she just tell them all to come and fight for Stannis as well? And we really don't get any of the sympathetic sides of the Brotherhood without banners. We haven't really seen them doing much for the people of the countryside yet, so they just come across as kind of mercenary, you know, halfway to being the new Robin Hoods. They're definitely stealing from the rich. They don't seem to be doing that much for the poor yet. In fact, they're selling them. Okay, Theon torture. 5 minutes of Theon torture. Was that necessary? Nicely acted, but yeah, we continue to question that, and would rather not see any more of it, but I don't think we'll get that lucky. And then we have the Queen of Thorns and Tywin. Two good actors, no doubt about that, but it's a really juvenile scene in the way she's acting. They're making her sort of oh so clever, trying to go toe to toe with Tywin, and then start talking about how, oh, a little discreet buggery is no problem in Highgarden, and surely you engaged in someone when you were young, and it feels kind of modern, and it feels, I don't know, it just feels wrong. And then Tywin goes into starting to threaten that he'll appoint Loras to the Kingsguard. And when Loras doesn't swear the vows of the Kingsguard, what's he gonna do then? And maybe the Queen of Thorns should have pointed out that the last time somebody took a lord's son into the Kingsguard when the lord wasn't keen on it, that son eventually ended up, well, stabbing the king in the back. Yeah, it seemed artificial, really artificial as a solution to, oh, I guess we have to betroth Loras to Cersei. And where do we stand? Let's see, we have finally, yes, Littlefinger and Varys. Again, two good actors. And in the first season, having, you know, their little talk, that was one of the highlights. We get to see, you know, we don't get to see Littlefinger and Varys because they're not point of views in the book, so we don't get to see that sort of thing. But we've kind of had it with their little explain the plot 101 moments, with Littlefinger as a moustache-twirling villain who's basically laying out all his plans. It starting to get very corny, and it's just so obvious, and it's like hit people over the head with what he's doing, and at least, well, Elio's not quite agreeing with me, but at least we've seen the last of Ross, who was, spying for both Varys and Littlefinger until she took an arrow to the knee and other vital parts. But, oops.
And that is our material for Reclaim. Thank you for watching, and apologies again for being a bit sick. Hopefully we'll be more on time with the next one, which is, of course, George's episode, The Bear and the Maiden Fair. The title tells us a lot about what's going to be in it. Really looking forward to it. Really hopeful about it. It's really going to be... should really be an interesting episode. Our only concern is this past episode, so much stuff was done that felt off in various ways, that they've stripped away subtlety from a lot of things, and that George is going to be hampered. And there's going to be stuff that he's going to have to write the stuff that they tell him to write, and it's not going to be as good as we know it could have been. But hey, maybe we're wrong. I mean, George has written 2 brilliant episodes so far. Maybe this will be a brilliant one as well. All signs point to it probably will be, so we'll see what next week brings.